Tanoyap in Sgsmåkvætels. Ayas Chepximiya. Ayas Chepximiya. Ayas Chepximiya. Chepximiya Siyam Janice. Tanachan Plas Nak Sgsmåkvætels Úxwumixw Úxwumixw and Squamish. I come here as a respectful person. My ancestral name is Chepximiya, and the Siyam means I'm representing my family. I'm a representative of my family. My elders asked me to represent our family as a hereditary chief. So I carry that chieftainship for my father's side of the family. And I also said peace to every one of you here this evening. I'm really honored to be here. Wow, that was great learning about other people's learning. I love that. And I guess I'll just talk a little bit about, we're here to learn about and talk about teaching. And I learned a lot of what I know and what the knowledge that I carry from my grandmother. And she was 98 when she passed away. But it just, it was my grandmother, but her grandmother, and her grandmother, and her grandmother. And it just goes, so far back. And I always talk about the timeline as, it's like a slide rule. It's like, there's the past, the present, and the future, but you can take the slide and move it all the way up, and the teachings that we have are still the same. The teachings that we live by are still the same. So when my grandmother was teaching me about being a weaver, she was talking about carrying it on, and now it's not something that is, it can be my passion, yes, but I have the skills now, she said, to be able to teach. And I need to teach who wants to learn in our community, and especially my family. So that was one of the things that she really stressed. And then she started talking about the weaving and how to wear the weaving, and that when we'd go to a large gathering in the community, if it was traditional or ceremonial, or if it was a nation administrative meeting, and my grandmother was there, and we walked in, and she would look at me if I wasn't wearing my shawl and say, "Where's your shawl? You should be wearing a shawl." Because it's protective. It's a spiritual protection that, she talked about and taught about. And then being a weaver for your community is so important. And so that's part of the teaching that we do. When we started teaching weaving, there was one weaver in our Squamish Nation. And now over 2,500 people have tried it. They might not all be weavers, but they have tried it, and they have learned about it. And that was one of the things we concentrated on when we started weaving, because it had been out of our community for so long. We decided we were going to give those teachings that come with the weaving, that, first of all, that my grandmother told me from her grandmother. And so she got these from before contact. These teachings were directly from her grandmother and her mother before contact. So those are first and foremost. I did go to art school as well. I went to Cap University, the textile arts program, and I went to the Institute of American Indian Arts, and double majored in three-dimensional arts and museum studies. But those are important. It's very important, and it's a great accomplishment. I'm very proud of it. But I think the teachings that I really hold near and dear in my heart, and that I couldn't get at Cap University and the Institute of American Arts even, are the teachings from my grandmother. And they are so close to what I do. It's what I do. It's not even what I do. It's really who I am and who she made me be. So those are the first and foremost things. And, I was, in my life, I've been really blessed to be, to go to school. blessed to learn from my grandmother, my parents, who died quite young, but who gave a lot of teachings in their young life. And when I look back on it now, it seems like they were teachings that were even old for how old they were when, they passed away at 40 and 42. So they were quite young to be handing off these teachings. And that's one of the things in our nation, I don't know if it's all Coast Salish, but Squamish for sure, is that I'm an oldest. And we know in the language there is a word for being the oldest. Because we know every person in the family who's the oldest carries a lot of the knowledge. They're the ones who get taught a lot of things so they can hand them off. So when we go and do research, or I've done a lot of research in our community, I go to the elder. We always go to the elder and say, is it okay if we, talk about this? What would you like to talk about? If you don't want to talk about it, who in your family could you recommend that, that could do that? So we really honor that. We still honor that to this day in our nation. So a lot of people went to started going to my grandmother she was in probably mid-90s, and people were doing a lot of research as well, and they would go to her. And my cousins do a lot of research too, so in the language, my cousin Peter is a PhD in linguistics, but he went to my grandmother and said, well, Granny, when you talk about weaving and you said this, and how do you, do that, and how do you do this? And she said, no, she said, I taught Janice what I know about weaving. I taught her all I know about weaving. So if you want to ask questions about weaving, you go talk to her. And I was like, oh no, I'm in trouble now, but it's a responsibility. And, I really love that responsibility. I love teaching. I love teaching as well. When we first learned when we learned how to do the technique of weaving, and everybody in the world in their culture has, a type of weaving, and especially the twine and the twill. Everybody has that from their country. It's just how you approach it and what you're doing when you're weaving, what you're thinking about when you're weaving, what the weavings are used for. Those are the different things, although everybody has the same techniques. And I think that's pretty amazing. So when I was at the National Museum, I worked with a curator there of the Pacific Northwest Coast, and she is Jewish, and her mother was a weaver, her grandmother's a weaver, and she's a weaver, and her daughter's a weaver. And they weave prayer shawls. So she loved that I was a weaver, and we we really worked together. We called people, we got funding and brought weavers to Ottawa from here, which caused a really big ripple in the community. People were excited about it, and we called on a youth to come as well, and so she could remember, and pass that, make sure somebody remembers for a long, long time and pass on that information. And we got to look at the collections, and more importantly, we sat down and we talked. So there was somebody from Seixalt, Musqueam, quite a few of the communities we brought together that we had already been there and taught. So we sat down and we talked about what is the best way, how do we make sure this survives? How do we make sure that it doesn't go away again and we have one weaver in the community ever again? And we decided that the best thing to do was to teach our own, because it had been gone for so long, we were kind of worried about the teachings about it, that we would teach first at home and talk about what it means in the community to have it, what it means in the community to be a weaver, what it means in the community to wear the weavings. And so we did that. And also we decided it was very important to make teachers. So whenever we taught in another community, we taught on the island, and we've taught all over Salish territory. And we always said, make sure you send somebody who would be a good teacher. You know, we would love for somebody from your community to be able to teach your people, because it's not our Coast Salish weaving, although we're teaching it. It belongs to all of us. And, you know, really wanted people, and people did, take ownership of their history. And a lot of magical things that you could never even thought of happened, you know, when we started teaching in the communities. I know in Sechelt, one of the elders remembered a song that had been lost in the community for decades and decades. And it was a mountain goat song. And that elder brought it back to the community and remembered it and brought it back to the community. And it was a really beautiful thing, because they didn't have a lot of songs at that time. So they really celebrated that. And those elders, you know, they thanked us in a beautiful way, and, you know, gave us gifts. And part of that part of it was so important. And we did teach elders. We did teach our own elders first. And it was quite emotional for those elders when we talk about our elders learning the cultural, traditional things that, you know, happened before they went to residential school. And I remember one of the students she was sitting there, and I was standing behind her, and she had finished her piece. And I was telling her, oh, that's beautiful. I'm so happy for you. Congratulations for finishing your weaving. And she put her head down, and she was shaking, and I was standing behind her, so she was kind of shaking, you know, and I thought she was laughing because she was so happy. And I put my hand on her shoulder, and she was crying. She said, my grandfather would be so proud that I learned how to do this. And I thought, well, you know, that it really changes your way of thinking when you're teaching something that, you know, can mean so much to a person, that, you know, they get so emotional about it. And our elders did. They were happy to see it come back. And that was really a huge, I don't even know how to put it. My heart grew. My heart grew. And I just felt so good about being able to have that knowledge and bring that knowledge back and share that knowledge. And also give our elders a chance to hand off their knowledge. And that made them feel good. So a lot of things happened. Like I said, just a lot of magical things when we were working on bringing weavers to the National Museum in Gatineau. And then, you know, just being there and working there, found out that we had 2 ancestors that were collected from Stanley Park and brought to the National Museum. And so I phoned home and I told our council, there's 2 ancestors here of our ancestors from Stanley Park. They're taken from Stanley Park. One was taken in the late 1800s, and one was taken in the around 1920s. So they said, well, you start that process right away. Start the process of bringing them home. So I started that repatriation process, and it's our first and so far our only repatriation that we've done so far, and of ancestral remains. So that was a huge learning curve. But, you know, the really amazing thing is that I called home and told our weavers and asked if any of them would want to weave something to wrap our ancestors in to bring them home. And so we had that, and it meant a lot to the people to be able to wrap our ancestors in something that they wore, you know, something that they always wore. So it was really, I felt like everything was just falling into place, and, you know, we were able to do these things to take care of those ancestors. So we did bring them home. We went over and got our ancestors and wrapped them up and made some beautiful boxes for them, and we flew them home. Yeah, that was amazing. We got into the airport, and our people were there to meet our ancestors, and the police gave us what do you call it when they come, when they ride with you? Or escort. Yeah, we had a police escort from the airport. And we decided we were going to take them through Stanley Park, their home, or they were. And that was just an amazing feeling to hold those ancestors and bring them through their home that were there 4,000 years ago, at minimum 4,000 years ago. And then we had a prayer service. We had every single ceremony and anything we could do to honor those ancestors, we had it for them. And we had prayers for them the night before. And I was sitting with my 95-year-old grandmother who was about this tall. And I was sitting in the chair with her, and we had our ancestors on the table, and it wrapped in the beautiful weavings and put in the beautiful boxes. And she said, I want to go see them. I want to go look at them. I want to go look at them now. And so she grabbed my arm, and we walked up there and looked at these ancestors. It was a man and a woman, and they were high people because their foreheads were bound and shaped at an angle. So we knew they were high people. And so we stood there looking at them, and I thought, that love that I felt from them was the same love I felt from my grandmother. That's how strong it was at that moment. And I thought, those ancestors were loving me and thinking about me just as much as my grandmother does now. And it changed my life. Being able to, wrap those, our weavers could wrap them in the way that they deserve to be, and we could bring them home in the right way. It meant so much, and it just changed my whole life, the way that I think about this place that we live in, and what, it's just, like, I'm so grateful to be in this place. Every time I drive over to the city, I look at Stanley Park and think about them. Think about those ancestors, that they lived there. And we talk about Horseshoe Bay, and I teach my grandsons about that place and say, it used to be the herring row used to come there. They used to put out the cedar boughs, and the herring would come in and lay the eggs on it, and that was the place that happened at before the ferries. And this place, Park Royal, my great-grandparents lived there, and my great-grandfather was a Shaker minister. So I'm just, I every day, every moment, look out the window and see the work that my ancestors did for me. And I think when we all, know the history of this place and the prayers that are put here, and that they stay here. The prayers of our ancestors are still here. How much we want to take care of this land, take care of the water, because it's so important for all of us that we all work together. Because we're going to have descendants who are going to talk about us 100 years from now, how much we love them, and that we took care of this place for them. That was the last art piece we did. Was my husband and I always collaborate, and it was the Vancouver Biennial, and we did a piece, and it was the year before we had that problem with the beaches were all closed in Vancouver. All the beaches were closed. The smoke was so bad we couldn't see over to the city. And L'hen Awtxw, that mama whale that I was watching every day, news about her, what happened to her. Her baby died, and she carried that baby for 17 days on her nose above water. And I felt like she was telling us, take care of this place. Look at my baby. My baby couldn't survive. We believe that the whales are our ancestors as well. We never ever hunted whales. But so when we talk about learning from who we learn from, I don't, can't even go that far back. I don't know where it would, where it comes from the Creator, like it does for all of us, I think. So thank you very much for listening, and T'mak Kwitsi. Those are my words. Osiyam.